It all started as an ordinary day on a quiet city street, but things took a turn when two police officers stopped a well-dressed black woman waiting outside a cafe. Their casual questioning turned invasive, their focus shifting to the flowing skirt she was wearing. They laughed, exchanged remarks, and pushed boundaries, thinking she was just another person they could intimidate. But what they didn't know was that she wasn't just anybody. With calm confidence, she reached into her bag, pulled out a badge, and placed it firmly in their view. The bold letters read CIA. In an instant, the air changed. Their smirks vanished, replaced by stunned silence. Who was this woman? Why was she there? And how did things escalate to this moment? Stay tuned to uncover the full story of an encounter that flipped the script in a way no one saw coming. The officers froze, their eyes darting from the badge to the woman's calm yet commanding expression. It wasn't what they expected, not at all. The moment felt like it stretched on forever, the street noise around them fading into the background. Who was she really? And what was a CIA agent doing here, alone, blending into the crowd like anyone else? Her name was Maya, though they didn't know that yet. She had spent years mastering the art of staying unnoticed, moving through spaces where curiosity wasn't welcome. But today, she had been spotted. To her, this wasn't new. Encounters like these were all too familiar, a reminder of the assumptions people made about her based on appearances alone. Still holding the badge, Maya didn't flinch. The officers tried to recover, mumbling something incoherent. She simply raised an eyebrow, waiting. They weren't the only ones with questions now. Maya kept her gaze steady, her badge still visible. The officers shifted awkwardly, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. One of them, a younger officer, opened his mouth to speak but hesitated, unsure how to address the situation now. The older one glanced at his partner, silently signaling him to stay quiet. They weren't used to being caught off guard like this. Maya, however, remained composed. Inside, her instincts were on high alert. She knew the questions racing through their minds. Was this woman really CIA? Was she undercover? And most importantly, had they just made a huge mistake? She could see the uncertainty written all over their faces, and she wasn't about to make it easy for them. But this wasn't just about her. A few curious onlookers had started to gather nearby, sensing something unusual was happening. Maya glanced at the crowd briefly, wondering who else might be paying attention and what consequences this moment might have. The silence between them grew heavier, like the calm before a storm. The older officer cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Ma'am," he began, his tone forced and uneven, "we're just doing our job. Can you explain why you're here?" Maya didn't answer right away. She carefully placed her badge back into her bag, her movements deliberate, as if every second mattered. The crowd nearby had grown, whispers rippling through as people tried to piece together what was happening. Maya knew the power of perception, how quickly things could spiral when the truth was obscured by assumptions. "I think the question," Maya finally replied, her voice steady, "is why you thought this was necessary." Her words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they were now under scrutiny, not just from her, but from the eyes of everyone watching. But the tension wasn't just about this moment. Maya knew her presence here wasn't random, and neither was theirs. Something bigger was unfolding, and the next move could change everything. Just as the tension reached its peak, a sudden crackle came from one of the officers' radios. Code red in the area, the dispatcher's voice blared, sharp and urgent. The officers froze, their unease shifting into something closer to panic. Maya's calm expression didn't change, but inside she felt a shift. A code red wasn't routine. It meant something serious, something dangerous, was unfolding nearby. The younger officer instinctively reached for his radio, responding quickly, details on the suspect. There was a pause before the dispatcher answered, unconfirmed. "Be advised, potential high-level threat. Proceed with caution." Maya's mind raced. She'd been briefed earlier about a covert operation happening in the city, but she hadn't expected it to escalate so quickly or intersect with her own mission. Were the officers part of this, or were they just caught in the crossfire of something much larger? Before they could say another word, a black SUV pulled up to the curb, its windows tinted. The doors opened, and two men in dark suits stepped out. Their eyes locked onto Maya immediately. She knew who they were, and what their arrival meant. Whatever was happening, it had just become far more dangerous. The men from the SUV approached quickly, their movements sharp and deliberate. The officers stiffened, unsure whether to intervene or step aside. One of the men pulled out an ID, flashing it briefly in their direction. "We'll take it from here," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The officers hesitated but ultimately stepped back, confusion etched on their faces. Maya didn't flinch as the men stopped in front of her. "Agent Daniels," one of them said, his voice low, "we need to move." "Now." She nodded, her demeanor shifting from composed to laser-focused. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she followed the men toward the SUV, her earlier encounter with the officers now a distant memory. Just as she reached the car, the younger officer called out, "Wait, who are you really?" Maya paused, glancing over her shoulder. "Someone you don't want to underestimate," she said, her words hanging heavy in the air. As the SUV sped away, Maya's thoughts raced. She'd avoided a public scene, but the real threat was still out there. The twist? The code red wasn't just near the area, it was about her. Someone had compromised her cover, and the mission she thought she was controlling had just turned into a game of survival. As the SUV wove through the city streets, Maya sat in silence, her mind piecing together what had just unfolded. The breach in her cover wasn't accidental, someone wanted her exposed. She glanced at the man sitting beside her, his expression unreadable. "How bad is it?" she asked. His reply was blunt. "Worse than we thought. You were the target all along." Maya felt a chill run through her. The mission had been a setup, a trap designed to draw her out. But instead of fear, she felt a familiar resolve. She'd faced worse before, and she wasn't about to back down now. Hours later, in a secure location, Maya reviewed the intel. The pieces finally came together: names, faces, motives. The game wasn't over, but she now knew the rules. As she prepared for her next move, one thing was certain: underestimating her had been their first mistake.